Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're taking a really deep dive into something pretty complex, this sort of hidden paradox of modern military power. We're going to look at the constant push for strategic advantage, in this world that's changing so fast.
Right.
But balance that against, well, the environmental costs nobody talks about, the huge logistical hurdles, and just the incredible speed of tech innovation.
Yeah.
And we're focusing today on some really fascinating developments coming out of Australia and the wider Indo-Pacific region.
Absolutely. Our mission today for you listening is really to pull out the key insights from quite a mix of sources.
Right.
We've got this new research paper on military emissions, which is eye-opening. Then there's news analysis of big exercises like Talisman Sabre.
A big one.
Huge. And deep dives into new defense tech, everything from lasers, guided weapons, even hypersonic missiles. The idea is for you to get a quick but still really thorough understanding of this area that honestly often gets overlooked.
And the sources are pretty compelling. We're relying quite a bit on a recent paper from the IZA Institute of Labor Economics.
The discussion paper, yeah.
Exactly. It sheds amazing new light on military training emissions in Australia. And we're pairing that with detailed reports from, top defense publications, Asia Pacific Defense Reporter, Vajiram and Ravi.
Good stuff.
We're going to pull out the surprising bits and really try to connect the dots for you. So let's kick off with something that might genuinely surprise you. It really captures one side of this paradox we mentioned. Military activities, right? They have this massive global footprint.
Huge.
We're talking 6% of the Earth's land surface.
Yeah.
2.5% of world GDP and spending. Just enormous numbers. Yet they're almost always overlooked in climate discussions. The IPCC, the big climate change panel, barely mentions the military.
It's a real gap.
So why? For a sector this big, why the blind spot? Is it just national security? Or maybe something more like a political reluctance to tackle such a powerful sector?
Well, that's exactly the challenge, isn't it? National security restrictions, they do limit access to detailed emissions data. That's true.
Okay.
But there's also this history, this sort of legacy of militaries often being exempt from environmental rules. Put those together, and you get a big hole in our understanding.
Right.
And it makes you ask, okay, if they're often exempt, what are the real consequences, the unmeasured impacts, locally and globally?
And that leads us perfectly into this new research. A March 2024 IZA discussion paper, Emissions from Military Training, Evidence from Australia. It's genuinely one of the first studies to try and directly measure local emissions from intensive military training. The big step in filling that data gap.
And what's really solid about it is the method they use. They didn't just guess. They use high-frequency satellite data and quite advanced machine learning. Specifically, something called a random forest model with a prediction error framework.
Sounds complex.
It is, but what it let them do essentially was filter out all the background noise. They could compare pollutant levels in the training area to a similar control area nearby.
Ah, so a direct comparison.
Exactly. They generated what they call counterfactual predictions, basically, what the pollution would have been without the training. That gives you a pretty reliable estimate of the actual impact.
So what did they find? Where did they look?
They focused on the Mount Mundy training area. It's about 120 clicks southeast of Darwin in Australia. Huge place, 117,300 hectares.
Wow.
And they measured key pollutants, carbon monoxide, CO, particulate matter, PM2.5, and sulfur dioxide, SO2. They looked at data during big exercises like Predator Walk 2015, Southern Jackaroo 2017.
And Talisman Sabre 2017, which you mentioned earlier.
That's right. And just to give you a sense of scale again on that one, Talisman Sabre 17 involved 33,000 personnel.
33,000.
33 ships, 200 aircraft, multiple nations involved. These are not small events.
Clearly not. So the impact. What did the pollution levels show?
Well, the training led to a noticeable increase in air pollution. Carbon monoxide, for example, went up by about 10% compared to the average levels in 2015. PM2.5 saw increases too.
Okay, 10% is significant.
It is, but here's the really pivotal finding. When they looked specifically at the peak training hours, mostly overnight 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.,
Right.
CO emissions in 2015 jumped by over 25% compared to their average values.
25%. Just from training exercises.
During those specific hours, yes. So the really startling thing isn't just that militaries pollute during training, it's that a single exercise or elements of it can spike local pollution by over a quarter in just a few hours.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's a blind spot in global climate models, you're saying?
We're largely ignored, yes,
Yeah.
which could have massive implications if this pattern holds true globally.
So what's the takeaway from this part?
I mean, fundamentally, it highlights that all sectors need to be part of the solution for climate change mitigation, not just the usual suspects like industry and transport.
Right.
This research really shines a light on an often ignored piece of the puzzle. It makes it clear we need a complete picture, even the parts that are tough to measure or politically sensitive.
And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? These exercises with this environmental footprint we're just starting to measure. They're the very same activities building the strategic capabilities needed for this evolving security situation, especially in the Indo-Pacific.
Exactly.
Which brings us nicely to Talisman Sabre itself, but the more recent iterations. The 2025 version is set to be the biggest, most complex warfighting exercise ever held in Australia.
Yeah, over 35,000 personnel from 18 nations, plus observers. It's massive.
This is the other side of that paradox we talked about, the drive for strategic readiness in a, well, pretty tense part of the world.
Absolutely. The objectives are clear. Boost partnerships, make sure everyone can work together seamlessly in interoperability, all aimed at supporting a free and open Indo-Pacific.
And the activities, what are they actually doing?
Everything. Live fire exercises, amphibious landings hitting the beaches, complex air combat drills, ground maneuvers. But the core insight, I think, from these recent exercises isn't just the scale. It's a fundamental shift in strategy, moving away from the old model of large fixed battles towards something much more about speed, dispersal, being able to operate and sustain yourself even when things are contested.
Right. Contested environments. That's a key phrase.
It really reflects a major strategic pivot in how Allied forces are preparing for what might come next.
And you mentioned sustainment. I know one big focus, especially for the U.S. Army, is something called contested logistics. Can you unpack that a bit? Why is it such a big deal now?
Think about the Pacific. It's vast, just huge distances. Now imagine trying to move troops, fuel, ammo, food, everything across those distances when an adversary might be actively trying to stop you sinking ships, jamming communications, hitting supply hubs.
Okay, yeah. A nightmare scenario.
Exactly. So contested logistics is about figuring out how to do that, how to keep forces supplied and operational even under direct threat. Given the geography of the Pacific, it's arguably the central challenge.
Is it even solvable? Or is it more about managing the risk?
It's definitely about managing the risk, finding workarounds, and we saw specific examples of tackling this during Talisman Sabre.
Like what?
Well, for the first time, they deployed M1A2 Abrams tanks all the way from South Korea to Australia for the exercise.
That's a long haul for tanks.
It is. And then there was the construction of this huge floating pier, 540 meters long, at a place called Bowen. It's called JLODSS, Joint Logistics Over the Shore.
Ah, so you can unload ships even if there's no proper port.
Precisely. Critical if ports are damaged or just don't exist where you need to land. And up at Waipa, they set up something similar for fuel and water, JPOTS, Joint Petroleum Over the Shore, supplying the basics in remote, austere locations.
So these aren't just drills, they're practicing very specific, difficult capabilities needed for a potential Pacific conflict.
That's exactly it.
And this ties into new ways of operating, new concepts.
Yes, absolutely. The U.S. Army, for example, has Operation Pathways. It's this ongoing series of exercises and deployments across the Indo-Pacific. The idea is to create what they call joint interior lines, basically, multiple points of presence and operation within the region.
Okay.
They're also fielding these new units called multi-domain task forces, MDTFs. Think of them as integrating everything, long-range missiles, cyber, electronic warfare, intel, all working together. The third MDTF deployed to Australia for Talisman Sabre, a first for them.
And it's not just the Army changing, right? The Marines.
Good changes for the Marines, too. They're rolling out Marine Littoral Regiments, MLRs, and this concept called EABO, Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations.
The ABO.
Yeah, the core idea is to move away from large, fixed, vulnerable bases. Instead, you have small, highly mobile teams that can set up temporary bases, operate, and then move quickly. Sort of a hub-spoke node approach, much harder to target. Exactly. And the Air Force has its own version, ACE Agile Combat Employment. Same principle. Spread out, operate from more locations, including places like Darwin and Tyndall in Australia, to make yourself less vulnerable if main air bases are hit.
It really sounds like a fundamental shift in thinking. Speed, dispersal, self-sufficiency seem to be the key words.
They absolutely are. And you see other partners like New Zealand participating in Talisman Sabre partly to align their own thinking and training with these concepts, even though they face their own challenges like keeping personnel
Right.
and just managing the logistics and biosecurity for moving all that equipment internationally for an exercise. It just underlines the sheer complexity of it all.
It does. It makes you wonder, though, does this very dispersed approach create new problems, like maintaining command and control, or maybe even making logistics more complex in some ways?
That's a really critical question, and honestly, probably one of the key things they're trying to work through in these exercises. It's a trade-off, definitely.
Okay, so beyond the grand strategy and the immense logistics, let's pivot to the tools themselves. The tech. This is where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit sci-fi even.
Mm-hmm.
Directed energy weapons. Lasers. These are being talked about more and more, especially for defense against things like hypersonic missiles, right?
Yes, definitely. And look, this isn't just theoretical anymore. Remember that incident back in February 2022?
The Chinese destroyer.
Exactly. Aiming a military-grade laser at an Australian P-8 surveillance plane over the Arafura Sea. That showed these aren't just lab concepts. They're being deployed, tested, used in the field. It makes the whole thing feel much more immediate.
And Australia is actively working on this tech.
Oh, yeah. Kinetic Q Australia got a contract, nearly $13 million, to co-develop a high-energy defensive laser prototype.
Okay.
And then you have really cutting-edge research happening between the Defense Science and Technology Group, DSTG, and the University of Adelaide. They're looking at ultra-short pulsed lasers, USPLs.
Oh, ultra-short pulsed. What does that mean?
It means incredibly powerful, incredibly brief bursts of energy. They're talking 100 trillion times brighter than sunlight.
Wow.
Powerful enough to literally vaporize material into plasma. The potential applications, think surgical strikes with light, disabling sensors or electronics from a distance, maybe even new ways to clear mines or obstacles. It's a leap in precision and energy.
And industry is involved, too.
For sure. Companies like EOS have their high-energy laser, or HEL, weapon, up to 54 kilowatts, designed for things like shooting down drones mounted on systems like their Titanus counter-UAS platform. General Dynamics is even showing off a Stryker vehicle variant that can mount a laser weapon.
So lasers are definitely moving from the drawing board to the battlefield. What about radar? That's crucial, too.
Absolutely. And Australia has a pretty unique capability here with the Jindalee Operational Radar Network, JORN.
Right, the over-the-horizon one.
Exactly. It's not line of sight like most radars. It bounces signals off the ionosphere to see over the curve of the Earth.
How far can it see?
Up to 3,000 kilometers out. It covers a massive area, 37,000 square kilometers of air and sea space. It provides 24-hour early warning, surveillance, and it's used for things like tracking illegal fishing or smuggling, too.
Impressive range. And there are other key players.
Definitely CEA Technologies, an Australian company whose phased array radars are genuinely considered world-class. They're fitted to the Royal Australian Navy's warships.
Phased array, that means they can track multiple targets very quickly, right?
Precisely. Highly agile beams. The government actually bought a big chunk of CEA recently to ensure it stays under Australian control sovereign capability. And CEA is building 4 new big air defense radars using advanced EISA technology.
EISA.
Active electronically scanned array. Even more flexible and powerful than traditional phased array. Better resistance to jamming, too.
Okay, so lots happening in high-end sensors and weapons, but it's also worth talking about some maybe less high-tech, but still really innovative Australian gear that's actually being used right now in Ukraine.
Good point. The cardboard drones, for instance.
Right. The Sipak Corvo PPDS. Made from waxed cardboard, delivered flat-pack.
Yeah. Reportedly used in that attack on the Russian airbase in Kursk. Small, slow, hard to detect on radar because they're mostly cardboard. They navigate autonomously.
And they caused significant damage, didn't they, to aircraft and air defense systems?
According to reports, yes. Damaged several fighter jets, maybe a transport plane, Panzer air defense systems, even radar for an S-300 battery. It really highlights how low-cost, innovative solutions can have a real impact.
That's amazing. And then there were the remote weapon stations from EOS.
Also seeing action, EOS is sending their Slinger system that's got a 30mm cannon, pretty potent initially 10, maybe up to 160 later, plus 160 of their lighter R400 units.
What can they do?
Very versatile. They can engage ground targets, but also aerial threats like drones, helicopters, even potentially slow-moving cruise missiles. And EOS is looking ahead, too, working on that directed energy weapon add-on, a laser powerful enough to potentially zap lots of incoming drones.
We shouldn't forget the Bushmasters.
Absolutely. The Bushmaster protected vehicles have been a really visible and apparently very effective contribution as well.
So connecting this back to Australia's own plans, how does this fit with their GWEO program? Guided weapons and explosive ordnance.
It fits directly. GWO is all about building up Australia's ability to produce and sustain munitions. We see orders like the $50 million for Israeli Spike anti-tank missiles for their new Boxer and Redback vehicles.
And there's debate about making those locally versus importing.
Exactly. That's a key part of the GWEO strategy, how much can and should be made in Australia. They have ambitions to manufacture missiles like the GMLRS rockets for the HIMARS systems domestically.
The ones used so effectively in Ukraine.
Precisely. And there are signs of local capability developing, like Black Sky Aerospace successfully testing rocket motors. But GWO isn't just about missiles, it's also about basic conventional munitions.
Like artillery shells.
Yes, like 155 millimeter artillery shells. The war in Ukraine has shown just astronomical consumption rates for those.
Right. Thousands per day sometimes.
And the stark reality, according to reports, is that Australia's current stockpile would only last maybe a few days at those sorts of firing rates.
Wow. Even with $4.1 billion allocated to GWEO.
That's the scale of the challenge. Ramping up production takes time, investment, skilled workers. It's a huge undertaking to build that kind of sustained industrial capacity.
Okay, let's shift gears again to arguably the most hyped area of military tech right now. Hypersonics.
The hypersonic race, yeah.
First, what are we talking about? True hypersonic weapons.
Right. Generally, that means weapons flying faster than Mach 5, 5 times the speed of sound. But crucially, they're also maneuverable within the atmosphere and often fly at lower altitudes than ballistic missiles.
So not just fast, but unpredictable, unlike, say, Russia's Kinzhal missile.
Well, the Kinzhal is often called hypersonic, and it's very fast, but it's essentially an air-launched ballistic missile. It follows a more predictable arc after launch compared to a true hypersonic glide vehicle, HGV, or scramjet-powered cruise missile.
And Russia has those other types, too.
They claim to. The 3M-22 Zircon is supposed to be a hypersonic cruise missile, and the Avangard is a nuclear-capable HGV.
But how have these actually performed, especially the Kinzhal in Ukraine?
That's been really interesting. It was initially promoted as this unstoppable wonder weapon.
Right, invulnerable.
But the reality seems different. Ukrainian forces, using Patriot air defense systems supplied by the West, have reported successfully intercepting Kinzhals on multiple occasions.
Really? Intercepting something moving that fast?
Apparently so. It's definitely challenged the missile's reputation and raised questions. Does this mean the hype around hypersonics is overblown? Or are these just early versions and the defenses got lucky, or the next generation will be better? It's a big debate.
So who else is in this race? The U.S.
The U.S. is spending billions, huge amounts of money, but honestly, they've had a lot of setbacks. Multiple test failures, programs canceled like the AGM-183A ARW, air-launched rapid response weapon. Didn't quite work out as hoped. There is promising research, though, like looking into plasma cooling to manage the incredible heat generated at those speeds.
And China.
China. Well, many analysts believe China might actually be leading the hypersonic race right now.
Leading? Ahead of the U.S. and Russia?
Possibly. They seem to have operational HGVs like the DF-17, maybe the longer-range DF-27. They have the Xingkong-2, believed to be a Wave Rider cruise missile design. They even tested something really exotic, a fractional orbital bombardment system, FOBS, potentially carrying a hypersonic glider.
FOBS. Sounds like something from the Cold War.
It is, but with a modern hypersonic twist, and it's not just the big three. India, Japan, South Korea, they're all working on their own hypersonic capabilities, too. It reflects the global nature of this competition and the regional tensions driving it.
But it can't be easy or cheap to develop these things.
Oh, absolutely not. The challenges are immense. The extreme heat is a major problem, material science, cooling. Communicating with something surrounded by plasma at Mach 5+ is incredibly difficult. The aerodynamic drag is enormous.
And the cost.
Astronomical. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office did an estimate. Building 300 comparable hypersonic weapons might cost around $17.9 billion. For the same capability delivered by ballistic missiles, maybe $13.4 billion.
That's a big difference.
It is. So they're expensive, they're complex, they're likely to be relatively rare, at least initially. That might limit how useful they are in a long, drawn-out conflict compared to sheer numbers of cheaper munitions. It's a massive investment with uncertain payoff right now.
Okay, finally, let's connect some of these threads back to that big strategic deal. Et que c'était un PS. specifically the nuclear-powered submarines for Australia.
Right. A huge undertaking.
Well, there have been some hurdles, haven't there?
Yeah.
Particularly with the U.S. legislation needed.
Yes, that's been a sticking point. Getting the enabling legislation through the U.S. Senate took time. There were real concerns, particularly from some senators, about whether the U.S. industrial base could handle building submarines for Australia on top of its own needs without slowing down U.S. production.
Is the U.S. submarine industry struggling?
They face significant challenges in terms of workforce, supply chains, and just meeting the current demand for the U.S. Navy. Adding the Australian boats is a major extra load.
And part of the deal involves Australia paying into the U.S. system.
That's right, and it's pretty unprecedented. Australia committed to transferring $3 billion directly to the U.S. Department of Defense to help shore up and expand that submarine industrial base. A very unusual arrangement.
So what needs to happen for this to work, production-wise?
The U.S. needs a serious ramp-up. To provide Australia with second-hand Virginia-class submarines initially, they probably need to sustain building about 2.5 boats per year. To build the new SSN AUSIS class later, alongside their own needs, maybe closer to 3 per year. That requires tens of thousands of new skilled workers, estimates say up to 100,000 across the supply chain.
A massive industrial challenge.
Huge. And then there's the other end of the life cycle, the disposal.
Ah, yes. The nuclear reactors.
Exactly. Australia has agreed to handle the disposal of the spent nuclear fuel and the reactor compartments from these submarines locally within Australia.
Is that controversial?
Very. It's described as a massive undertaking. You need an incredibly secure, long-term facility, potentially for thousands of years, to store high-level radioactive waste. And this is happening despite the U.S. already having established facilities and processes for exactly this kind of waste from its own naval reactors. It raises a lot of questions about cost, safety, and long-term responsibility.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture from all this,
what you see, I think, are the immense complexities of modern security. Developing advanced weapons like hypersonics or lasers is hard and expensive. Adapting logistics for contested environments is a huge challenge. And even major international cooperation like IACUS faces significant industrial and political hurdles, not to mention long-term environmental legacies.
that's not simple.
Not at all. It's all interconnected. The tech, the strategy, the industry, the alliances, the environment.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've gone pretty deep today.
We have.
We started with that paradox, how military operations, even just training in peacetime, have this measurable, often ignored environmental footprint.
Right, the emissions study.
Then we looked at how powers are adapting strategy, Talisman Sabre, contested logistics, dispersal, and developing incredibly advanced tech, from lasers to hypersonics.
And the challenges that come with all of it. Industrial capacity, cost, international deals like ACU, even waste disposal.
It really underscores something you said earlier, doesn't it? That knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied.
Exactly. Critical thinking is just so vital with all the information flying around. We hope we've helped you see some of the connections today, those links between defense, the environment, technology, and geopolitics that aren't always obvious.
Maybe we can leave you with one final thought to mull over. As militaries around the world chase this cutting-edge tech, as they adapt to these new threats, are they perhaps so focused on gaining that strategic advantage that they might be overlooking some very real, very immediate costs, costs that are environmental, financial, maybe even social, that could ultimately affect all of us down the line?
Something to think about.
Definitely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive on the Global War Watch Network.
We really hope you gained some valuable insights today. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global War Watch Network. It really helps us out.
And we genuinely love to hear your thoughts on all this. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Until next time, stay well informed.